la abacotshiwe bonke ngezikhundla zabo. Ngibingelelani ibandla lonke ngokuthula. Amen. Welcome to the first installment of our Ignite sessions for 2025. These sessions are made at empowering the youth with skills and knowledge to navigate life. This is open to the youth, but however, even if you are still young at heart, it's also open to you because we don't gatekeep this side. My name is Boni Somhlongo, and I will be your host for this evening. Now, before we get started, I'd like to remind Abazalwane of the basic house rules. Please keep your mics and videos off until the end of the session, where you will have an opportunity to raise your hand to ask questions, or alternatively, you can just type your questions in the chat box if a question arises. Now, I'm very excited about tonight's masterclass, which is on emotional intelligence. My excitement is because this session will not only unpack emotional intelligence in general, but it will also contextualize how we can use emotional intelligence to navigate with emotions with wisdom and purpose. This will also improve our interpersonal relationships as well as our inner peace. Our masterclass tonight will be led by Lwanele Khasu, who is a woman who wears many hats. By profession, she's a clinical psychologist, but she's also an author, a podcaster, a speaker, and CEO of Oasis Wellness, where she leads a suite of mental health services, which include programs and masterclasses. Lwanele, a very warm welcome to you from us at Church of the Holy Ghost.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Sure, that was beautiful. All right. Can I go ahead? Can I jump
Yes.
in?
No, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sbo. Thank you as well to the church at large, to the eldership, to the leadership. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of what I do and what I'd like to teach you. When I got the brief on emotional intelligence, I was like, oh, in an hour. Like I'm sure like it takes a year or two in school to be able for us to break it down. But I mean, God gives us grace for such things, so we'll figure out how to break it down in a meaningful way. Um, yeah, so a little bit about me, so that you understand who is talking to you with you. I'd like to talk with you. I know the house rules, there's no videos and all of that stuff, but I like a little bit of engagement. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand. Please put it in the chat box. Please, unmute yourself so that, I do have a little bit, so I don't talk at you or to myself. So please do that. You're absolutely welcome to just at that point, if maybe I'm saying something and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to know a little bit more, just raise your hand or put the question in the question box or in the chat. It literally is nice to understand what I need to unpack because maybe I'm taking it a little bit lighter. And of course, if you don't want to make a comment, if I've hit a nail for you, you're absolutely welcome to do so. So please, a lot of the shy people, you can utilize a lot of the chat. At least I'll know that I'm not talking to myself. And the thumbs up and the clapping and the stuff. At least I know there are people on the other side, right? So a little bit about me. I'm Lwanele Khasu. I am a clinical psychologist, like Sibo had said, and I run a company on wellness. Outside of that though, I feel like I do that, mini little margin. Outside of that, I'm a mom of two boys, a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I am a wife to one husband. And, we must say this all the time and make sure that we are re-saying this, one husband. Um, and yeah, I love the outdoors. I love running. I love taking walks. I'm an introverted person. I love people, but I also like them in ways that I can have meaningful conversations with them. So I'm a little bit of a serious person in that I like talking. So I like engaging and having conversations. So that's why I'm saying, please have a conversation with me tonight. I understand it's a masterclass in webinar style, so there isn't a lot of that in-person conversation we could have if we were in the same room. But if you give me those thumbs ups and those laughs and those things, it will help me understand that there are people listening on the other side. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And in terms of the topic today, I just want to unpack it a little bit before I am gonna present. But I just want to unpack it a little bit in terms of just saying that emotional intelligence is a huge topic. It's a very important topic. So I really would like to say thank you to the leadership of the church for allowing us to have this conversation. And I'm so glad it's coming from church because so often we are afraid of having these conversations at church, and even the congregants, we are afraid of engaging on those matters because we're thinking, does that mean I don't have enough faith? If I'm challenged emotionally, in any way, if I am feeling a little bit overwhelmed, what does this mean? Do I not have the peace that surpasses all human understanding? So it's an important thing for us to talk about these conversations. So thank you to the leadership of the church for allowing us this platform to have these conversations. And I think for everyone in the room, I know we've got people on Zoom and we also have people on YouTube and other platforms. I want you to frame your mind, right? I'm not gonna make us do a breathing exercise, it's okay. But I want you to frame your mind and understand this was organized by church, but this was organized by church for you, right? It's not for anyone else but for you. So I can sit here and talk for an entire hour or 45 minutes, and Lord knows He's given me the talking ability, and I can do that. But if you don't take anything for yourself, then you would have missed the purpose and the intention of today. So I want you to think about yourself in terms of, okay, this is for me. What do I take from it? And I like saying this that because in a masterclass, webinar, virtual, anything, it's so easy to put me in the background while you're busy cooking mince, right? And I do this sometimes as well, where it's like someone is talking, but you're somewhat listening. But I want you to, even if you're driving, even if you are still cooking the mince, to be very intentional that this session is for you. It's not for the next person. It's for not for that person you know cannot handle their emotions very well. It's for you. What are you going to take from it? So if you can write for yourself on a piece of paper your to-do list. And your to-do list, when you take notes, is not exactly what I'm saying. It's what you're taking from what I'm saying and what you are going to do about it. So if I say engage with people meaningfully, you're going to have to say, tomorrow, I need to call Snare to actually say, I'm sorry for the thing that I did to you. So I want you to make it very meaningful and intentional that you do a to-do list from the conversation today, because that's how you know you actually can take things in a practical manner to apply them. So I'm going to share my screen and we're gonna get right into it so that we can have a lot of time to be able to just engage with the conversation. But I want us to start from a place of checking in. So I understand that you are going through a phase of fasting, you're going through a theme of restoration, and I want to get a bit of a sense of where you are at before I even go into my content. So, since you've gone into this fasting period, since you've gone into this reflection period, this clarity period, what do you believe you now know about yourself? Very tough question. Yes, you've landed in psychology right there. What do you believe you know about yourself? If you could please type for me in the comment, in the chat so that I can kind of see some of those conversations coming up. What do you believe you have learned and now you know about yourself, right? So we go through this period so that we can get to know God, so that we can understand where we stand, so that we can understand His purpose for our life, where we need to be going in this year with our lives. We have the Word of God. Not so much so that we can always know ourselves, but really to know God and to understand how we can carry out the mandate and the vision that He has for our lives. So, what do you believe you know about yourself in this time? So, I'll wait I'll wait a little bit for some of those responses. So if you can type, and if there's a brave soul, you can unmute yourself and actually share something.
I'd like to say something since it's
Sure.
all. The one thing that I know about myself is that I'm a shy person, I'm introverted, and I'm not very good at public speaking, but I've learned to do it scared. Even if I'm unsure, I will just go ahead and do it because there's no better way to learn than to actually do something practically. So that's one thing I've learned about myself.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to see if there's anyone on the chat. Okay, so we haven't received any. Is there anyone in the room? See some thumbs up. Next thing, it's just Bo and I having a conversation with each other. Can I see some thumbs, some reactions of thumbs to see that there are actually people in the room listening? I see Noma Pelo saying that I struggle with being dependent on others. My goal has been to have been self-sufficient. And that's such an interesting thing. Thank you for sharing, Noma Pelo. That's such an interesting thing because, I what the word encourages us more than anything is to be able um to be reliant on one another. That's why we the the fellowship with the saints that actually helps us understand how do we share some of those struggles with each other. So thank you so much for sharing. And it is a to-do list, I guess, to work on. And Snetemba says, I struggle with asking for help or sharing my true feelings. And it's very similar. It's quite interesting in that we are the people that actually love so much to be dependent on ourselves and not other people. And isn't it interesting in how God actually teaches us how to depend on Him so much because He puts us in those situations where we have to depend on Him. So I want to frame this conversation. Thank you for sharing. I want to frame this conversation by a scripture. I promise you, I'm here in my capacity as a psychologist, and I will continue that just now. But I do want us to frame something which I think is so important. In Matthew 22, verse 37, I'm going to read it. Unfortunately, I won't wait to see who's gotten it, but it's Matthew 22, verse 7. The word says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. And the reason why I wanted to frame this conversation with that particular scripture is, isn't that telling you so much about emotional intelligence? Because in there is your recognition of who you are and whose you are, right? So you are a child of God and you are God's child. So your whose you are is your identity. And it also says to you, you love your neighbor. And what is that? That's relational. Emotional intelligence says other people. So it's not just my own able to love yourself in a particular way. Think about your needs, think about your requirements in a particular way. Isn't it amazing that the Bible encourages us to be able to do the same for other people? So if you asked me what emotional intelligence is and thinking about your purpose and your wisdom, that's exactly what it is. It's being able to allow yourself to think about your emotions and think about another person's emotions. So in that way, you are intelligent in the way of your emotions. Of course, we'll break it down a little bit more into what that actually means, right? And if you've got any questions, please, So One of the things that becomes so important when we're thinking about our emotions is to understand where emotions generally stand in where things are going. And the reason why I want to point us to this is because most of the times we are frustrated with ourselves. Oh, I thought someone was saying something. We are frustrated with ourselves in why am I not at the stage where I'm so self-aware? But maybe there are particular things you haven't crossed over to get into that stage. What do I mean? So Maslow talks about hierarchy of needs. I think most of us actually know about it. I won't even go in deep into it. I just want you to be able to frame your mind to understand where your emotions kind of sit in the needs kind of a hierarchy. What Maslow says is at the bottom of our needs, we always need physiological things. So those are your basic needs, your food, your shelter, your sleep, clothes, just existence. If you don't have them, you die. If you don't eat, you die. If you don't, if you don't have shelter, struggling. So the basic need. And then comes safety. So that's more like your personal safety, your security, your employment, resources, health, wellness. Now we're starting to think a lot more about other things in our lives, right? And then you've got love and belonging. So this is friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection. So what if you feel like I don't have food, it becomes such a struggle for you to think about your friend. And of course, we need to be thinking about ourselves and our friends and our family. But when those basic needs aren't met, it's so hard for us to sit in that space where we're actually being selfless. And then above that is esteem. So that's respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. This is when you are now going into things that somewhat feel like what we use in colloquial terms fulfill you, right? And then self-actualization. So self-actualization just means that you want to become the best that you can be. So the reason why, if you don't understand where your needs are at this point, it becomes very and I need to learn to regulate my emotions. I don't care about what I think. I don't care about how I feel. All I want is to be able to go to work, make some money, have food for my family at the end of the day. Or I just want to pass this exam. I just cannot think about how I feel about it. Do you get what I mean? So it's important for you to understand and locate yourself. Do you feel like you've arrived at that space? Because if you feel like there are some needs that you still need met, perhaps that's the reason why you've been neglecting a part of your self-care and a part of your sense of self. That's why you were like, I can't even think about emotional intelligence. I just need to be able to. It's because you probably haven't arrived at the place where you're feeling safe and secure in order for you to start thinking about that. I don't know if there's anyone resonating and saying, I feel like at some points that becomes me because I'm like, I can't think about where I am and what my feelings are. So thanks, Rachel. I see you. Um, so then we think about, so what is emotional intelligence? So this is where I need you, so the brave boys and girls, men and ladies, to also just, put it on the chat. What do you believe emotional intelligence is? So when we talk about emotional intelligence, or what comes to your mind? What do yourself and share your views? But let's put it in the chat. What do you believe emotional intelligence? What do you think we're talking about? So if you see me looking away, it's because I'm also just trying to view the chat from my side. Okay. All right, so I see that there were some responses to the previous question. Yes, I've learned that I'm flawed, yet acknowledging my mistakes and can be hard still. Um, Stetimba is answering now the question. It's the ability to name my emotions and know how to regulate them. Yes. Michelle says how an individual manages emotion. Yes, thank you so much. And layer two says it's being able to communicate your feelings clearly and also being empathetic about others' emotions. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your responses. It's exactly that. It's all of the things that you have said. And I wanted to simplify it quite a lot in the way that I defined it. It really is about, can you recognize? Firstly, can you understand? Secondly, can you manage? And can you influence your emotions for yourself and for those around you? What do I mean? If someone talks to you in a way that you don't like, and then you respond in a defensive manner, can you recognize that the thing that Lerato just said to me offended me? Do you understand why the thing that Lerato said to you actually offended you? Can you manage your emotions and the reaction that you have to Lerato in the moment? Um, and respond to her or even show her that you are hurt by the thing that she's saying? And can you then influence your emotion and saying, actually, I cannot take all of Lerato's stress from work and make it my own all the time, or anytime a person says anything to me that I don't like, or I don't want to actually acknowledge about myself. Do you understand? It means that when you're emotionally intelligent, you are doing all of those four steps, right? You are recognizing, because sometimes we are those people who are like slipping our, emotions under the carpet. We don't want to recognize that we're hurt. We don't want to acknowledge and be vulnerable that we're hurt by someone. We don't want to understand why we're hurt, because if Lerato can say one thing to you, but actually when Dalo says the same thing to you, you're not hurt. Why is it that it hurts you that Lerato has said it to you? Why is it doesn't hurt when Dalo says it to you? So it's those nuances sometimes that we really have to drill deep and understand about ourselves, because if we don't understand those things, we actually miss being able to regulate and navigate our emotions with wisdom and purpose. Okay, I'll pause here. Any questions? I just want to view the chat again. So Rachel said the ability to think beyond one's own survival or needs in relation to others. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if there are any questions, please let me know. If it's all clear, can I see some thumbs up? Okay. So what then emotional intelligence, if we break it down, right? Thanks, Rachel. If we break it down, what emotional intelligence has are four components, and you want to think about yourself as well in these four components. So the first one is around self-awareness. How aware are you of your emotions? Do you know your emotions, right? And I'll break it down to you a little bit further into what are the questions you need to think about and how do you actually understand where you stand, right? The next thing is self-management. Can you regulate yourself, right? I think it was Netemba who had said regulating your emotions. Can you regulate? Now that you know you're upset, do you get upset at everyone and throw your, hands in the air all the time? Do you start, fighting with people? Do you become aggressive every time you're actually upset? How do you regulate that upset and that hurt so that the person understands and can communicate with you, and you can communicate with them and let them know that they've hurt you? Social awareness. Social awareness means that you are recognizing the emotions in others. We are not isolated people. We live with people. We do community with people. And as the word that I'd read earlier, we need to be able to love our neighbors, right? So we need to be able to recognize emotions. This person is actually not feeling very well. This person is not okay. That's being observant. And that comes from a place of loving people, if we're being honest. Like when you don't care about people, you don't even want to notice, care, or that whether they are okay or not. But we're called to love. So when we're loving people, we observe that my friend is not looking okay today. That's a little bit of that social awareness. And then the relationship management is navigating your social interactions wisely. Sometimes we get ourselves in situations and they're really not helpful. So how do we do that? And how do we navigate those emotions in helpful manner? Because we need to, for our own sake, right? For our own sake. So is it clear? Am I making sense? Cool. All right. So what then does self-awareness look like? And I love this definition of self-awareness because I feel like it really helps us understand the nitty-gritties. So self-awareness becomes our ability to observe and accurately identify our thoughts, our feelings, our impulses, and determine whether they are grounded in reality or not. Now zoom in with me in that last section. Grounded in reality or not. How many times do we make things up in our heads? Like, I'm one of those people where a person says something to you, or you are, or someone is not responding to you in the way that you'd like them to, and suddenly, in your mind, that person doesn't like you anymore. In your mind, it means that the person doesn't value you anymore. In your mind, it means that the person actually doesn't, like you make up stories, right? So being self-aware means we need to understand, are the things we're feeling, thinking, and impulsive over grounded in reality or not? When you are thinking to yourself, I'm not good enough, is that grounded in reality or not? Like, what is the evidence or the proof that you have that you're actually not good enough? And have you even defined for yourself what good enough actually looks like? Do you know the matrix to your own good enough, right? So if you saying I'm good enough when I have a job, when you do get a job, do you actually recognize that, oh, I'm now good enough? Or do you find another criteria to disqualify yourself as not being good enough, right? Because we will continuously keep chasing things if we don't define what does it mean to be good enough. So being self-aware means that we are understanding who we are and checking if those things are actually grounded in reality or not, right? Are we good? All right. So then if you're thinking about it, so in this point, now you need to start thinking about, so how do I understand then if I'm okay or if I'm not okay? Because sometimes we go through things and we're not okay, and that's part of being self-aware. We need to understand, is my state of mind in a good place, right? So I like to explain that when we mentally well, we exist on a spectrum of four things, right? And the first one is around healthy and flourishing. So we are in a good space. We are feeling in control. Our relationships are working well. Our mind is at ease. Everything is going well. We all would love to live here, right? But actually things happen. Someone talks to you in a way and you don't like it. Someone doesn't invite you to a birthday party and you're feeling a little bit sad. Something happens and you're just like, this is, I didn't like this. And what that does is that it moves you from this healthy and flourishing space to a common reversible issue, right? And what this means is that you are somewhat affected, but it's still okay. Right? You are somewhat affected by the thing that happened, the way the person spoke to you, the way that you failed a test, you failed a driver's test, something happened and it disturbed your peace, essentially. But it's a common thing and it's reversible. So you'll experience this by having things like irritability. Maybe you don't sleep very well for a week. Maybe you start to eat a little bit more than usual. You have difficulty relaxing and you're just feeling a little bit of worry. You're procrastinating things you otherwise wouldn't procrastinate. This is how you're seeing, oh, I've moved away from my space of being okay into a space of something is off. But here's the nice thing is you can go back to healthy and flourishing if you are self-aware, because you can know to yourself, like, I am doing things I wouldn't do. I am eating 6 meals a day and I don't do that. I'm not eating at all and I love food, right? You're not going to be able to observe yourself moving into a place of I'm not okay if you don't even know yourself, right? So you're investing in getting to know yourself. So you understand, it's not like me to sleep the whole day and the whole night. Something's off. And when you are realizing something's off, then it's time to do about it. Because if you don't get your life or intervention in that moment of common reversible issues, you can get injured. And what injury means is that these are now the things we start experiencing when we're experiencing a little bit of anxiety, depression, OCD, burnout, anxiety symptoms, hopelessness, helplessness, poor performance, social withdrawal. You know you love seeing your friends and suddenly you're like, yo, they mustn't come, they mustn't call me. You pretend to not be home, but you know you are home. Like all those things that you know, like, I'm trying to hide myself from people, I'm withdrawing from people. Or you know you love being at home and suddenly you are always going out every single day. You don't want that space of actually even thinking about yourself or thinking about your life. You injured somewhere. You delayed, interacting with a feeling and it festered a little bit more than usual. But you can still get back, right? And if you don't do anything about it then as well, then you can get severely ill. So when we start thinking about mental health issues, we are thinking about some of the issues from the severe illness. It doesn't start there. It starts all the way from you are healthy and then you ignore things, ignore things, ignore things until they actually become really bad. So I want you, if you take anything away from this, it's the check in with yourself and be aware when you're seeing a little bit of changes in yourself that you know this doesn't look like me. Like you don't shout at people and suddenly you are shouting at people. You're like, where is this coming from? You're a person who's generally nice and sweet, but suddenly you're snapping all the time. Something's wrong, right? We're being self-aware. Now we're understanding something has moved from its usual way it usually is. Okay. I'm gonna pause after this particular slide and check in if there's any questions. So if you've got questions, please just type them in and let me know. So what could it look like? Because at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, Lwanele, I see, I hear, I understand, but what does this actually look like in reality? So there's three things that you can probably notice. You can either notice yourself physically, emotionally, or behaviorally. Physically, you might notice things like I said, headaches, changes in sleep, hypertension, you're stressed, you're always tired. Emotions are very exhausting anyway. Like, I don't know. You're always tired all the time. You're yawning. You can sleep 50 hours. You're still tired. Emotional, you see things like anger, anxiety, low mood, detachment, numbness, frustration. So you're experiencing yourself as a person who's now moved away from just the peace that, God wants us to have, really. And behaviorally, you start seeing things like I was saying, isolating yourself from others, changing is in your performance. You're not performing well at school or at work, your commitment to things, your motivation to things, you're just absent and you're actually not as present as you generally are as a person, right? So this is how you then are able to assess, I've moved away from my good place. I've entered into a place where I'm either in a common reversible, I'm either injured or actually I'm severely ill and I need, interaction. So it's important for you to be able to acknowledge that. So now I'm going to ask you these questions. So think about them while I read some of your questions that you've got here and I answer them. So these are questions where you are now reflecting on your own self-awareness. What emotions do you struggle to acknowledge? How do you typically, respond to stress and stressful situations? And what do you find triggers you the most in your personal or work relationships when something triggers you all the time? Like, I'm triggered, but you don't know. So this is time for you to start doing a little bit of that reflection so you understand exactly what you get from it. So if I'm going a little bit too deep, Nizongolela, you will forgive me. I was built that way. I go straight into it because I want you to find value in the information that I'm giving you. So it's not always fun and games. I can trigger you a little bit. So some of the questions that I need you to think about. So I think now in the chat, I just want to check. Michelle was asking, how do you recognize that you're avoidant? Generally avoidant people don't recognize that they're avoidant because they're avoiding to recognize that. But when you feel something and you don't want to think about it, is one of the times where you recognize that you're being avoidant. You're understanding that I'm feeling an emotion, but I'm actually avoiding it. Or someone does something to you and you're like, it's affecting me, but I'm actually just not gonna entertain it. So it's important for you when you even starting to wonder to yourself, am I avoiding something around here? You probably are. So you will know. That's the thing about our bodies, our minds, is that you'll know when you're affected by something. You'll know when you're hurt by something, but you will actually either decide to ignore it or to reason it away. All right. And then Vusi is asking, how does emotional intelligence lay the foundation for accountability? So, this question from Vusi, Spo, can we answer it in the Q&A, right? I'll answer it and I'll try to break it down a little bit more. If you could please help me note it. So this question from Vusi, I want to focus on the ones that are a little bit more focused on what I was saying, but I definitely think that's a good question and I'll answer it just now when we're doing the Q&A. Is it from Lerato? Is it possible to feel like I'm operating from all four spectrums? Absolutely. It's a back and forth. It's a back and forth. But the question is, Lerato, where do you find yourself actually sitting mostly? Because that's your danger zone. So one of the things we say as psychologists, or even the way that we diagnose, is we ask you a question of how long have you been experiencing whatever you've experiencing. So if you've been experiencing it for 3 to 6 months constantly, or for most of the days, then there's something going on there. Then that's where you are mostly operating from. And it may not even just be around just like you move back. Of course, we move back and forth all the time. But whatever you find in your 3 to 6 months and constantly experiencing, that's probably where you're at. And then Mr. Ngiba's asking, how do you resolve conflict with those who avoid? I'm also going to ask you answer this question. Spo, please help me note this one. I'll also answer it, at the end because I also feel like this is a really important question that we need to break down. So Pumelo is saying when you go through something and it only hits you or impacts you at a later stage in your life, even when you check in with yourself regularly, is this a sign of lacking self-awareness, or does it mean you weren't as aware as you thought at the time you were going through that particular phase? It's a couple of things, Pumelelo. It could be a thing of at the time when you were experiencing it, you're right. Maybe you didn't have capacity to deal with it. I'll give you a very typical example. Most of us, when a loved one passes away, especially when we're in a space where we have to be responsible, we actually check those emotions and put them at the back because there's a funeral that needs to be planned for, right? Or when something happens in your life and it's around exam time and you actually just don't have the capacity to deal with it at that time, you actually put it away. And most of the time you don't then go back and saying, oh, let me now process these emotions about this thing that actually happened. It's just you get triggered. So let's say, for example, you decided, oh, life moves on. I've lost this person. You didn't go back into processing that loss. And then your friend loses someone. And then it feels like this distant person you've never even met at this funeral with people you don't even know. Suddenly, all of those emotions come back. It means they were packed away at some point, and now you're feeling safe enough, or your body's reminding you, there's a thing that you actually didn't process, that you didn't think about because you didn't have the capacity for it. So it doesn't always mean that you're not self-aware. It just sometimes may mean that you don't have the capacity to deal with it in that moment because there are more pressing matters that you actually need to attend to. And sometimes it just means that you're avoiding it. Like, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to feel it. I'm going to drown myself in work because I actually just could not engage with it in that particular way. So that sometimes it could also be that. All right. So I'm hoping you've noted these questions for yourself so that you're able to engage with yourself truly and ask yourself these questions. What emotions do you struggle to acknowledge? How do you typically respond to stress? And what triggers you the most in your personal or work relationships, right? I don't know if there's any questions or reflections or anyone that wants to unmute themselves and say something at this point before I move away. Okay, I think we're all good. All right, so what then become the techniques to building that self-awareness? So these are some of the things that you can do. Emotional check-ins, you pause and you label what you're feeling. I think Snetemba said this, or was it Rachel who said it's, emotional intelligence is naming your emotions. So you have to label your emotions. I am feeling sad. We learn emotions from our families and most importantly our parents, because when you come back from school and you're crying and you're 7 years old and you don't know what emotions are, or maybe 5 in these days, because 7-year-olds are a little bit awake in the head. And you come back from school and you are, and you're crying and your mom is asking you what happened. You're saying, I got 60% and I wanted to get 80%. Your mom gives you vocabulary and says, oh, you're feeling disappointed that you didn't get these feelings. Sometimes, because of course, the reality of life is that we don't then have those conversations with the people around us, and therefore we miss that label and that vocabulary of knowing how we feel. So when a person asks you how you're feeling bad, go be, it's bad. Like you're not labeling the emotion. And the value in labeling the emotion is because you then understand exactly where it comes from. If you're saying go bad, like sometimes you're just like, yeah, it's at work. But if you're understanding, I'm feeling disappointed. Why are you feeling disappointed? I'm feeling disappointed because I applied for this course at UP and they didn't accept me. You are trailing the thought of your disappointment. So that's the value of being able to label your emotions. So you pause, understand what you're feeling, what is it, and put some words into it. Mindful practices, it's being present and noticing your thoughts without judgment. This is so important. And I want to say this is so important because we judge ourselves so much. The way we talk to ourselves about ourselves is so unkind. It's not the love yourself that Jesus talks about. It's not the love your neighbor. We're just so judgmental to ourselves. I should have, I could have. No. Maybe that's a place that you're still growing. And maybe that's still a place that you need to be praying about that you get better. So you have to be present, notice your thoughts, because your thoughts affect your emotions and your emotions affect your behavior. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you think you are not good enough, you're going to start feeling insecure. When you feel insecure, you're going to start doing things and behaving in ways of people who are insecure, which is overcompensating, or you just decide to cut off completely from doing things. You're not going to be motivated. So it's so important to guard your heart. It's so important to guard your thoughts because they are such big things in terms of the fruit that you flourish out of your life. So be very mindful of what you're thinking about yourself, right? And about other people, and then asking for feedback, right? How do others perceive your emotional responses? So now let's ask Lerato. Lerato, I responded to you in this way when this was happening. What was that like for you? What did you think? What was your experience? Yes, you were wrong, but maybe the tone that you used wasn't the best, or it wasn't optimal. So that's how you build that sense of self. You build your self-esteem by checking in with yourself emotionally, being mindful, and actually asking for some feedback from people. Of course, this goes without saying, you cannot just ask for feedback from anyone. It has to be people that you trust, you value their opinion, and they either have been through where you are at and have conquered it, or they're actually just sober-minded. You don't want to ask feedback from people that are actually going to lead you astray, right? Because that's so, so important. I am going to send this to Snare, but I feel like this is such an important exercise to do with yourself. It's being able to understand what are the things, it's a way that you are able to do self-awareness and getting to know yourself. What are the things that you know about yourself that other people know about you? Right? That's on the other quadrant. What are the things that you are unaware of, but others actually know about you? That's where the feedback comes in. So you're blind to those things. What are the things that are hidden? So the things that are known by you but are unknown to others because you're hiding yourself a little bit. You're feeling a little bit embarrassed. Ooh, I can't show people this part of me. So what are those things that you've hidden from people? And then what's in the unknown? What are the things that people don't know and you also don't know about yourself, right? So this is more explorative. You explore this to understand yourself a little bit better. So if you can fill in your Johari window outside of this masterclass, so I am a person who gives homework. I think I should have been a teacher, right? The reason why I give homework is because we come to master classes and it feels great. And then tomorrow you're like, okay, so what do I do about the information I received again? So what I'm saying you need to do, firstly, you answer those questions that I gave you for self-awareness. And secondly, this is what you do. This is the exercise you do. So you take a picture of it, but I'm going to send it out so that you can have access to it. So, but this is the exercise. So this is how you do the work even beyond the masterclass, right? So that's it on self-awareness. So I'm just going to do a bit of a recap before I move on. In order for you to be emotionally aware, of or emotionally intelligent, you have to know yourself. You have to know how you respond to yourself, how you respond to people. You have to understand your emotions. Are you thriving and healthy? Are you feeling a little bit of common distress? Are you feeling a little bit of injury? Are you severely ill and you actually need to get some help? Are you experiencing physically, emotionally, and behaviorally that are making you feel like, I am not the person I know I generally am? Something has shifted. I shout at people. I shout at my kids. I'm snapping at people. I'm eating too much. I'm not eating enough. I'm sleeping too much. I'm not sleeping enough. Something in my life has changed, right? So, and then when you have asked yourself, you ask yourself, okay, so what do I need to do? What are the emotions that I'm experiencing? How do I reframe that? What am I mindful of what's going on? All right. But like I said, I'll send you all of these so that you can sit with them. So emotional check-in, mindful practices, and asking for feedback. I'll pause here and check any questions, any clarity, anything that anyone wants to say, or can I move on? The other sections won't take as much, so don't stress. I won't eat too much of the time. Okay, because the foundation of understanding your relationships with other people comes from being able to understand yourself and what triggers you, right? Very, very important things. So then if now that we are aware, now we need to manage ourselves, right? And what is self-management? Self-management is your ability, self-control, fruit of the spirit. It's your ability to control your impulses, manage your stress, and adapt to challenges. Why? Because challenges are going to happen. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are always going to experience challenges. Adversity is part of our lives. You cannot avoid it. Being resilient doesn't mean that you don't experience adversity. It means you bounce back when you've experienced the adversity. It means you've got tools and skills that help you understand how to bounce back from those things. So in order for you to manage yourself, you have to be able to control those impulses, manage the stress, and adapt to those challenges. Self-management also helps you prevent emotional hijacking, where your emotions, overpower logic. Sometimes we do that, right? Our emotions just take over all the time, and you need to be able to manage those. So I've got a couple of questions for you here as well in terms of how do you manage some of that self self-management or some of those emotions. I do see there's a question that came from Noltando. How can grief affect my faith, and how do I reconcile my emotions with my faith or my beliefs? I will answer this question as well with Vusi and I think it was Mpumelelo's question. I'll answer it when I'm done. Okay. So then self-management questions that I want you to be able to reflect on is what situations make you emotionally reactive? There's those things. There are those things when we experience them, you're like, it does not matter if you just woke up, it doesn't matter if it's just after meditation, you just walked out of your prayer room and a person says that thing and and it actually triggers you into a place where it's like you just didn't just spend a whole hour with God right now. So, what are the situations that make you emotionally reactive? Because that's going to make you wiser in how you relate to other people. It's going to make you avoid, it's like, this one is coming at me this way. I don't feel like I have the capacity to deal with them right now. So I'm actually just going to end this conversation a little bit and move away, because sometimes that's how we have to manage ourselves. It's being able to say, this one is not the conversation I want to actually engage with, not right now. Let me pause it or defer it to another time, and then I'm going to be able to address it another time. The other question is, how do you typically calm yourself down? Some of us struggle with this. right? We struggle to calm down after we've actually been activated by a person or by a situation, right? And what new strategies will you start practicing, right? So let me give you my strategies of how you can regulate yourself and what I think works best, but you can add some of your own, right? So the first thing that I feel like is very important when you're managing your emotions and you're regulating your emotions is reframing it cognitively. Because remember when I said in self-awareness, I said it is understanding if the things you are feeling and thinking are grounded in reality or not. Because sometimes we overreact emotionally because we are not grounded in reality of what's happening. So, what cognitive reframing says is replacing the negative thoughts with constructive perspectives. So, instead of saying, I failed at this, I'm a failure, you said, I learned something valuable. Oh, now I know I actually shouldn't do this thing like that. You are reframing something. And more than anything, you are not labeling your identity according to that failure, right? You can even acknowledge, like, I failed at this, and that's okay at failing at it, but it doesn't mean I am a failure because I failed at something, right? Because failure also helps us understand how to know how to do things better. Pausing and responding, very simple technique. You take a deep breath before you react to a trigger. Simple. You just pause and you breathe from your stomach. If you ever did choir, I did choir at school. I don't know how to sing. I don't know. I think they didn't have enough people. And then they were just like, we'll add this one as well. Because I don't know how to sing, but I was in choir for years at school. But they tell you you must breathe from your diaphragm, right? So you take a deep breath all the way from your belly and it will calm you down. If you take about 2 or 3 of those deep breaths, you'll actually feel a little bit calmer because it has a biological effect. When you take deep breaths, you calm your heart rate down and you're actually calming some of those thoughts that may be racing, right? And you actually then respond better to people. Emotional labeling. I labored on this, so I'm not going to labor it on again. You, instead of saying I'm stressed, you become more specific. I am overwhelmed because I have 5 assignments to do. Then you know exactly what's overwhelming you, right? You know exactly what's coming at you, and therefore you can plan accordingly because there are 5 things that are overwhelming you. Instead of just always saying, oh, I'm so depressed, oh, I'm so stressed, oh, I'm so anxious. What's causing the anxiety? What are you saying? You're not anxious all the time. And we're not angry, we don't have anxiety all the time. Sometimes we're just like feeling concerned about things and we label ourselves with these things and it becomes part of our identity. So instead of saying, oh, I'm always so stressed, you be specific about the thing that you actually are overwhelmed by so that you can do something about it and you can plan accordingly. And then grounding and mindfulness techniques. It's distracting your mind, right? There are times where you have to avoid the emotion because it's too overwhelming in the moment. And you do that by distracting your mind. You identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. This is just an example, but it could be anything. You're like, oh, that thing, I've never noticed that thing is so pink, or that thing is so green, or that it means you are literally pulling yourself away from the overwhelming situation so that you can calm your mind down and you can actually relate to the situation a little bit better once you're somewhat calmer. Okay, so those are my regulation techniques. I've got about 4 or 5 minutes of content and then I'll go straight into the questions. So now that you know how to relate with your self-awareness, you know how to regulate your emotions. Like I said, I'll share some of these slides so that you're able to understand a little bit more. So then you're saying, how can I be socially aware? Because emotional intelligence means I understand my emotions, but I also understand the emotions of my community and the people that I do life with. And your social awareness or your relationship management or being able to relate with other people says you have to have the ability to accurately, sometimes it's not always accurate, but close to, perceive emotions in other people. You have to see my friend is not okay, my mom is not okay, my sister is not okay. That just takes you being outside of yourself and not being selfish. That's just the basic step where you just notice this person is a bubbly person and today they are not being bubbly. What's going on? That just means you've literally moved away from looking at yourself just for a little bit and started to actually paying attention to the people around you. Helps in reading between the lines in conversations. Sometimes it is easy, sometimes not so much. So if you don't understand, you're saying, am I hearing you when you're saying like this? Is this what you mean? Is this what you meant? Involving empathy in listening and understanding emotional cues. When people are telling you, I'm so sad, it's not your time to say, you, I'm also so sad too, because you've just like moved away from the person trying to be vulnerable and sharing the conversation with you or sharing with you what makes them sad. If the person is sad, you ask, oh, what's happening? How did it happen? Oh, okay. You understand a little bit more about their situation rather than wanting to make it about yourself again. Okay, so you're socially aware. Now, here are reflection questions for you about social awareness is how well do you notice others' emotions in a conversation? Do you ever feel like you're noticing what people are feeling as they're telling you something? Or are you thinking about what am I making for dinner at the end of this conversation? What emotions do you struggle to recognize in other people? Is there something you find yourself having a blind spot to? Like a person is talking about how they're so hurt or how they are so feeling deflated, and you just can't recognize that in other people because you're saying to where you are the kind of person who says, if you're feeling deflated, just keep going, just keep pushing, right? So you cannot recognize when a person is being vulnerable with you that they're feeling demotivated. And how can you practice more empathetic listening in your daily life? Are there places where you can recognize that actually I need to be a little bit more empathetic to how my mom is sharing with me what she's going through, or how my friend is going through this, or how my sister or the person in my cell group, how they are going through? Is there ways that you can be a little bit more empathetic to listening in your life? So I'm going to share this and then I'm done. Well, I've got where to get help, but I'm going to be done after this. So what are the key? Oh, that's baby. What are the key techniques for building social awareness? Active listening. I've just said it, right? You have to avoid thinking about your response while someone's talking. You don't want to think, oh, I'm going to say this. Oh, I'm going to say this, because you're just going to miss the conversation, right? So you want to use paraphrasing as well to confirm understanding. So what I'm hearing you say is this what you mean? Because you want to make the person feel heard, right? You want to be able to affirm what they're feeling. Like, hey, understand that you're feeling a little bit angry, but I don't think throwing away their book was the right thing to do at that moment, right? You're being validating of their emotions, but also you're still not just allowing people to just be, right? Reading nonverbal cues, so facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. So these are the things that can help you understand, this person is somewhat feeling closed to me, or they're actually feeling really open, and I need to do a little bit better in showing up for them. And then practicing empathy. So you try to understand the emotion behind someone's words, not just the words. Sometimes people don't know how to speak in a way where it's like these wonderful voices or names or words, like you want them to say it nicely. But some people don't speak like that. You just want to understand what's the intention behind what a person is trying to share with you. If a person is being short-tempered, or if a person is feeling a little bit stressed, or somewhat they're feeling anxious and they're not always anxious when they talk to you, that means this thing is probably so important to them. So you want to be a little bit more attentive. So, in order for us to navigate our emotions in everyday life, we have to be aware of ourselves. We have to be able to manage and regulate our emotions, and we have to take care of people around us. And be aware of how they are feeling and how they're showing up in the world, right? So there are many other places where you can get help if you like thinking, oh, Lanele, all I'm stuck in what I heard is that I'm in severe illness. Like I just need help. There are places where you can actually get help. This is a list of some of the things that I've listed. Um, and if you feel like that's you, please let me know, even if it's after the session or something. I generally hang back after master classes in case someone wants to ask a personal question they didn't want to ask in the big group. So I will hang back. So, but the basic thing, and I think that's what the church is also communicating, is the time for struggling alone is over. Like, you don't need to struggle alone. You don't need to feel like you can't share things with people. You don't need to feel a stigma or ashamed of any emotions that you're feeling, but you have to take them to someone and actually have a conversation with someone or share or get help, because you shouldn't go through it all by yourself. Okay. I think that's me for now. I know I tried to like go quickly, but I also wanted to explain quite a bit so you don't walk out with a lot of information without the understanding. I'm hoping it's made a couple of sense. Please thumbs up if it didn't make sense, and any questions. So Sbo, I'm going to give to you. I know there are some questions that I didn't address. So fortunately, I did address some of the questions. So I'm going to hand over to you. Yeah, with some of the questions. I don't know if you have any questions, and then I'll address some of the last questions that I left over.
Sure. Thank you so much for that insightful masterclass. So we'll just jump straight into the questions because there's quite a number of them. The first ones, I think we've got two from Vusi. And the first one was, how does emotional intelligence lay the foundation for accountability? And then the second question he asked was, how does someone unlearn the way they relate to their emotions from how they've been brought up in their childhood?
Okay, so the first question, how does the intelligence lay foundation to accountability? I think it's simple in the sense where sometimes we are not accountable to the things we do because we've already judged ourselves and judged the action of what we have done as this is so wrong, right? But when you've got a little bit of that intelligence, when you've got a little bit of that self-awareness, when you've got a little bit of that relatability with other people, you can understand where you can be accountable, right? So if, for example, you said something mean to someone, you know you can be accountable to that person by going to apologize to them. If you know that I'm struggling with this particular thing in my life and you're self-aware about it, then you can go and ask for help from someone at church or a professional psychological person or something. So when you are emotionally intelligent, you are a little bit less judgmental on yourself or other people, as a matter of fact, and you are able to just understand the struggle for what it is, and you're able to deal with the struggle for what it is. And then the second question, in terms of what was the other question? Let me see. Yeah, how does someone unlearn the way they relate to their emotions from how they learned during their childhood? So this is like a whole therapy process. Hey, obviously this is a lot more than just one word answer or one sentence answer, because it's a process of unlearning. But one of the best things to start with is knowing why you learned that in the first place, or where you learned it. So, for example, if the way you relate to your emotions is we don't cry here, right? Because that's what you were told in your childhood, that you don't cry. You unlearn that by recognizing that it's okay to cry. There are places where you want to cry, and there are places where you don't necessarily want to cry, and where it doesn't feel appropriate to cry, but it's okay to express those emotions. So it starts with you identifying those places where you would need to unlearn. Once you've done that identification of the unlearning, you then start doing the work of, how do I unlearn from this? How do I unlearn from that I'm not good enough? How do I learn from all of these other things? But it generally is it's a whole therapy process to do the unlearning. But if it feels like things you can identify by yourself and you think it's things you can unlearn by yourself, then absolutely knock yourself out. It also helps with accountability to self as well, because when you're seeing yourself to say, at home, we were told that clothes are only bought for Christmas. So even if I don't have shoes, I'll keep wearing the same shoes until it's around Christmas and I buy myself clothes once. So you then acknowledge that no, but actually I'm working quite hard to be able to afford shoes. So I won't splurge unnecessarily, but I actually am gonna give myself the things that I need when I need them. So it's just kind of like a loose example because I'm not necessarily sure the nitty-gritties, but you can unlearn things. You just have to start by identifying them first.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that. I feel like in your last response, you've also covered this next question where this person asks, how does emotional intelligence lay the foundation for accountability? I don't know if you want to further expand on that.
Oh, I think I answered that first. That was
Yeah.
Vusi's question. Yeah.
And then the next question is that how do you resolve conflict with those who avoid from Miss Dengiba?
It's hard because the by its nature, conflict is between two people. There is internal conflict you can feel by yourself, and therefore you need yourself to resolve it. But conflict with another person, unless that other person wants to come into the party and resolve something, you're not going to be resolving anything. Because you both have to identify, okay, so what are the issues? Okay, so how do we deal with them? How did we get here? But if you're doing it by yourself and the other person doesn't want to come into the picture, then you'll find those instances where you end up apologizing for things you didn't actually do. Let me just stop sharing actually. So you'll find yourself, in that place where you are apologizing for things that you actually didn't do just for the sake of peace, and it doesn't really land you in any place that's meaningful. So you want to be able to have the other person be also as committed to resolving the conflict. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself.
Thank you for that. The next question is, how can grief affect my faith? And how do I reconcile my emotions with my faith or beliefs from Nolutando?
Mm, sure. This is a big one, hey, no, Tando, because the the diplomatic answer would be grief wouldn't necessarily or should be affecting your faith, but it should be allowing you to actually trust God even more. I don't know about you, but it's the times where I've been the most brokenhearted, where I have literally um felt like I rely on you, God. I need you right now. I need you to do something every single day. You know when the scripture says give us our daily bread. It feel those moments of affliction and heartbreak. I feel like for me, it's like it's always the give me the daily bread today. Oh, and today again, Lord, and strength for today again. But I think one of the things that we do when we're struggling with things, and this depends on our knowledge of God as well, is that we start being angry with God because we're like, but Lord, I prayed for this person's healing. Why didn't they get better? But the reality is, if we understand that, God is a loving God and trials, we are going to go through trials. We are actually promised an appointment with adversity. Like it's not even a matter of if, it's when. We are always going to experience something. Then it helps us understand that there's gonna be a time when we are afflicted, but we are not going to be crushed, right? Where we are feeling confused and perplexed, but we are not gonna be destroyed. So I think we prepare for these moments by even when we're in a good space to continuously get to know God and His Word. Because if we don't have a scripture at the top of our heads when we're going through something, we're going to struggle to try to go pull it out when we're actually going through something. And the second part of the question, which is how do I reconcile my emotions with my faith? I don't even think they are mutually exclusive. I think it's one of those things where we feel stuff, and the Bible even tells us some of the things we will feel. We will feel confused. We will feel concerned. We will feel anxious. We will feel all of these things. And then it kind of gives us the guidelines of what we do when we're feeling some of those things. So I think it's not a psychological answer, but I think the answer for me would be we go back to getting to know ourselves and the God that we're saying we are trusting. And I think that gives that should give us comfort to understand that even through trials, grace is still there and grace is still sufficient for us. And I see psychology as not existing in separateness with our faith, because I feel like that is a provision of it's a profession that's been provided for us in order for us to break down our emotions and understand them. It's not to say it's one or the other. So just because you're feeling overwhelmed or anxious doesn't mean you've now neglected your faith. No, it just means you're going through stuff and you need to allow that process of therapy, but also the process of grace to just do its work on you.
I love that part. Allow the process of grace to do its work. And
Yeah.
then the last questions, because of time, is how does overthinking impact emotional intelligence? And what are some of the techniques of calming down the mind and reduce overthinking? This is from Precious.
All right. Thank you, Precious, for this. So, um, it's overthinking. Overthinking is a thing we do. If you think about it, overthinking is a thing that we do when we are not feeling certain about something, right? And what does that sound like? Sounds like anxiety, right? Anxiety is uncertainty about the future. Depression is a grief about something that's happened in the past. So when we are feeling depressed, it's because something has already happened and we are grieving the thing that's happened. When we are feeling anxious, it's because we are overthinking the possibility of something that's going to happen in the future. So we are uncertain whether we're going to be able to pay the bills at the end of the month. We are uncertain whether the person loves us as much as they say they are. We are uncertain whether this is going to work out. So when we think about overthinking, we are thinking about our mind is finding itself in a spiral of anxiety. So it impacts our emotional intelligence because when we are in that spiral of anxiety, we're not thinking clearly. We're not regulating any emotions. We're not understanding anything. We're just spiraling out of control. And the techniques to help you with that is I always say, and it will sound very logical, but I always say just understand what are you overthinking about. So if you had to just keep quiet, because what we do when we're overthinking is that we try to avoid the thoughts. Like, don't avoid the thoughts. Try understand what you're thinking. What is your mind overthinking? I'm overthinking about the test. I'm overthinking about the thing. And write those overthoughts down. Because what that's going to help you with, it's going to make you realize. Remember, I said part of the things about self-regulation is understanding whether the thing you can do something about it. So when you write those things that you're overthinking down, you actually realize, no, but if I actually study for the test and I study this much, then I'm actually going to be fine. But and then there are some things you'll realize, oh, but I actually have no way of controlling whether my parents stay together or not, or whether we're able to pay for rent at the end of the day or not, because I don't work, you know. So there are things where you just like, okay, this one I can't do anything about, and it's actually not gonna help me to even think or overthink it because I have no solution. But the solution which I love, because we're a church and I can say this, and well, I can say it anyway, actually. But the one thing that's nice is that then we can surrender, right? Because we understand we are generally not going to be able to do this on our own. Like, you don't know, you can only pray for your parents' marriage. You can't do anything about it other than that. So whatever you finding yourself overthinking about, you can either ask yourself, can I do something about it? If I can, what is that? And if you
Mm.
find yourself saying, I can't do anything about it, then you can't do anything about it. But some of the ways of calming down, I think some of the things that I've said when I was going through in terms of the regulation, you have to understand, are you at the space where you can deal with it, or you need to distract yourself a little bit? If you are at the space where you can deal with it, can you do breathing exercises to calm yourself down? Can you allow yourself to take one thought at a time and break it down as if it's a mind map and saying, what's the different things of this thought? So there are different strategies, essentially, is what I'm saying to you, Precious. I'm hoping as I keep giving you some of the strategies, you're thinking about what probably would work best for you, or what you were thinking about. But the best way to kill overthinking is understand what you are overthinking and check if you can do anything about it or not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. And that wraps up question and answer. Sure. Thank you so much, Lanele, for availing yourself for this impactful and powerful and insightful masterclass. Because let's face it, in as much as emotions are a heavy topic, it's a very necessary topic. And whether we like it or not, it has a rippling effect on how we present ourselves to the world. So it's one of the things that we need to take cognizance of and deal with. So I was very happy to learn that there are various strategies that I can implement in order to self-regulate my emotions. Particularly, I'm an overthinker. So that really cripples the way I approach things because I'm overthinking things. And when I write things down, I'm able to identify that actually the scenario that I'm creating in my head does not exist. The likeness of it occurring is minimal. So it helps me
Yeah.
navigate all these various emotions. So thank you so much for that. And then for those people who say they still want to know more, how do they contact you?
Okay, so thank you for that, and thank you also just again to the church for really having me and allowing me to have this conversation. So very simple ways of contacting me. It's through our phone numbers. I don't know if I should give them to Snail or the church or even write them down. Let me just write it quickly. But you can just like text us and message us, call us, and let us know what you need. So that's how you can get a hold of me, or via email, which maybe I must also just put in. But yeah, I'm very easy to get a hold of, or Google Lwanele, and then you'll probably be able to find my company. Um, to be able to see how to get hold of us, but that's just the easiest way to just kind of find us. Yeah, but thank you so much, and thank you to everyone that shared their questions, that shared their vulnerability. Because I know sometimes the questions make it feel like they're putting yourselves out there. So thank you for all of for that, and thank you to the church for inviting me. And thank you for a wonderful session, and thank you to you, Spo, for hosting.
Thank you so much. Be on the lookout. We may just be inviting you again because I see there's still a number of questions. So we may be having this session again. So thank you so much, Lwanele. And thank you to the church for making these platforms for us because we are from a church that doesn't only focus on our spiritual well-being, but also focuses holistically on our entire well-being. So this session was very impactful and very much needed. So that brings us to the end of this session. Hope it was an impactful and insightful as it was to be. Thank you. Have a blessed evening. Uktula.